Don't. It still hurts there. Her voice tore out of her like a broken nail, thin and shaking, carried by the hot summer wind. Caleb McRae froze on one knee, his hands hovering where he knew he should not be, yet knew he had to be if she was going to live. The woman lay face down in the dead grass, her dress torn and filthy, her body trembling as if the ground itself had betrayed her. His shadow fell over her, broad and heavy, the kind of shadow that once meant safety to him and now meant terror to her. She tried to crawl away, fingers digging into dust and straw, every movement sending a sharp pain through her hips and upper thighs. Her breath hitched when he reached for his coat, and she flinched as if the fabric itself meant another hand where it did not belong. "Don't," she whispered again, weaker now. "It still hurts there." To anyone watching, it would have looked wrong. A big gray bearded rancher kneeling behind a young woman half broken in the grass. Caleb knew exactly how it looked, and he hated that the world had shaped itself this way. He eased his coat over her back, slow and careful, giving her cover from his eyes and the sky, his hands never touching bare skin. Blood had dried along her leg, not fresh now, dried hard from hours in the sun, angry and dark, proof of something rough and recent. He spoke low, his voice rough from years of dust and silence. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said, every word measured, every breath controlled. She did not answer. Her shoulders shook, and a sound came out of her that was not a sob, but something closer to an animal caught in wire. Caleb reached into his saddlebag, pulling out clean cloth and a small tin of water, moving slow enough that even the grass seemed to wait. When he shifted closer, she stiffened again, pain flashing across her face as her hips moved even an inch. That was when he saw it clearly, the bruising along her side, the way her body protected itself without her asking it to. This was someone being dragged around until pain became the only language left. Caleb felt something old and dangerous stir in his chest, something he had buried with other bad memories. He set the cloth on the ground where she could see it, then backed his hands away. "You do it," he said softly. "I'll tell you how." Her head turned just enough for one eye to find him, wide and glassy, searching for the lie she expected. When he did not move closer, when he stayed exactly where he was, something in her cracked. She reached for the cloth with shaking fingers, every inch of movement costing her. As she pressed it to her side, a sharp cry escaped her, and she bit down on her lip hard enough to draw blood. Caleb looked away on purpose, staring at the horizon where red rock rose from the land like broken teeth. He talked to keep her grounded, to keep her here. "Name's Caleb," he said, steady and plain. "I run cattle not far from here." She swallowed, then whispered, "Eliza." A fly buzzed between them, bold and careless, and Caleb waved it off without thinking. The heat pressed in, thick and suffocating, and he knew she could not stay out here much longer. When she tried to shift again, pain seized her, and her hand clenched in the grass. "It still hurts," she said, quieter now, like an apology. Everywhere there. Caleb nodded once, even though she could not see it. "I know," he said, because it was the only honest thing he had. He poured a little water onto the cloth, sliding it closer with the toe of his boot, never crossing the line she had drawn. As she cleaned herself as best she could, tears ran down her face and disappeared into the dust. That was when she whispered a name, barely more than air. "Wade." Caleb's eyes hardened. Names mattered out here, and that one did not sound like a man who feared God or law. Before he could ask, hoofbeats carried faint across the plain, distant but real. Eliza heard them too, her body tensed, panic snapping back into her like a whip. "He'll find me," she said, terror sharpening her voice. "He always does." Caleb rose slowly, standing tall now, scanning the land. The summer wind shifted, bringing with it the smell of sweat, leather, and horses that did not belong to him. He looked down at Eliza, small and broken in the grass, and understood something final. Helping her would cost him peace. Walking away would cost her life. He knelt again, careful, deliberate, making a choice he knew would follow him to his grave. "I ain't leaving you," he said, firm now. Not today. Her eyes searched his face, reading every line, every scar, weighing truth against terror. The hoofbeats grew louder, and as Caleb reached for the reins to lift her from the ground without touching her hurt, one question hung in the hot air, heavy as a verdict. Who was Wade Hart? And what kind of man hurts a woman so badly that even help feels like another crime? Caleb lifted Eliza the only way he could, slow and careful, one arm under her shoulders, the other braced at her knees, never letting his hands wander where fear might turn into panic. She was lighter than she should have been, all bone and shaking muscle, like someone who had not eaten right in a long time. The hoofbeats faded behind them as he carried her to the shade of his horse, tying the reins low and steady so the animal would not spook. "Got a place not far," he said. "Plain and easy, water, shade, and a roof that don't leak much." She nodded once, barely. When he set her down against the saddle, she winced, hands gripping leather until her knuckles went white. "I know," he said, without being asked. "I know it hurts." They moved slow across the plain, the horse walking easy, Caleb leading by the reins so she would not feel every step. The sun slid lower, still hot, but less cruel now. By the time his ranch came into view, a low spread of weathered wood and wire near Kayenta, Eliza was trembling again, not from pain alone. This was the part where people got handed back. This was the part where lies caught up. Caleb saw it in her face and chose his words careful. "You stay as long as you need," he said. "No one gets you without you saying so." At the ranch, he settled her on a narrow bed by the window, curtains pulled to keep the heat out. He set water within reach, then stepped back, giving her space like a man who had learned the cost of crossing lines. Eliza watched him with one eye open, every move judged, every breath counted. He washed his hands slow at the basin, letting her hear the water, letting her see he was not in a hurry. "Rule here," he said, turning away from her while he spoke. "Door stays cracked. I don't touch unless you ask. And if you want me gone, I go." That earned him a look, sharp and confused. Most men did not offer exits. Night came thick and quiet. Crickets filled the dark, and the wind pushed dust against the walls. Eliza slept in pieces, waking with a sharp breath, hands flying to protect herself before she remembered where she was. Each time, Caleb stayed where he was, seated by the table, clean intact that did not need cleaning. In the morning, he found fresh tracks near the water trough. 2 horses, shod, recent. Someone had been asking around. He did not tell Eliza right away. Instead, he fixed coffee, weak and bitter, and left it on the table with bread and a little dried meat. She ate slow, watching him like a stray cat deciding whether to bolt. Later that day, they rode into Tuba City for supplies. Caleb kept his hat low, eyes open. Eliza kept close, her steps careful, pain still written into the way she moved. Inside the general store, a man looked too long. Then he looked again. His smile did not reach his eyes. Caleb felt it before Eliza did. The shift in the room, the air tightening. The man said her name like it belonged to him. Eliza froze. Caleb stepped between them without thinking. There was no speech, no warning, just a short, hard movement that sent the man stumbling back into a stack of crates. Wood cracked. People shouted. Caleb did not chase. He took Eliza's arm, steady but not tight, and walked her out. Outside. A deputy watched them go and said nothing. That told Caleb everything he needed to know. Back at the ranch, Eliza finally spoke the truth, not in detail, just enough. Wade Hart was her stepfather, a respected man to the neighbors, a devil behind closed doors. Caleb listened, jaw set, hands still. When she finished, there was nothing clever to say. So he said the only thing that mattered. "You're safe here," he said, "for now." That night, the wind carried the sound of distant riders. Not close enough to see, close enough to warn. Caleb stood on the porch, rifle resting against the rail. Coffee gone cold in his hand. Helping her meant trouble. Letting her go meant worse. He looked back at the light in the window, at the shadow of a young woman who had already survived more than most. And he knew the road ahead, it was going to hurt everyone involved. Before we move on, drop a comment. What time is it where you are, and where are you listening from? The next morning, Caleb did not pretend things were normal, because out here pretending got folks buried. He was up before the sun cleared the ridge, feeding his horse, checking the fence line, and walking the edge of his property like a man measuring how much trouble could fit inside a day. Eliza stayed near the window, sitting with a blanket around her shoulders, even though the summer air was already warm. She watched him move around the yard, and every time he turned his back, she seemed to breathe a little easier. That told Caleb she still trusted her fear more than she trusted any promise. He did not take offense. Fear kept people alive. He did something simple instead. He gave her a job that did not require strength or speed. He set a small pan on the table with a few beans and a dull knife. "If you feel up to it," he said, "trim the bad spots. We'll make stew tonight." She looked at the beans like they were a test. Then she nodded and started working, slow and careful. It was not about stew. It was about giving her proof that she still had a say in what happened next. Caleb saddled up around mid-morning, and Eliza stiffened, thinking he was leaving. He shook his head. "I ain't riding off," he said. "I'm riding close." He pointed toward the road like he was talking to himself. Those tracks by the trough weren't coyotes. Eliza's knife stopped. Her eyes lifted. Caleb kept his voice steady. "We're going back into town," he said. "Not for fun, just to listen." She swallowed. "I don't want him to see me. He already sees you," Caleb said. "We're just going to see him back." They rode into Tuba City late morning. When the heat started to climb and the street turned soft with dust, Caleb kept Eliza on his right side, close enough that he could read her breathing. He did not hold her arm. He did not push her along. He let her choose the pace, and that alone kept her from breaking. Caleb bought a small sack of salt and a spool of twine, then leaned on the counter like he had all day. The clerk, a thin man with tired eyes, nodded toward the street. "You the one got in a scrap yesterday?" Caleb shrugged. "Fella bumped into me." The clerk gave a small half smile, the kind folks gave when they did not want trouble but liked seeing someone else get it. "That fella's name's Deke," the clerk said, dropping his voice. "Works for Wade Hart." Eliza flinched like her body heard that name before her mind did. Caleb watched the clerk's face. "Wade Hart," Caleb said. "Quiet." The clerk looked away. "That man's got friends," he muttered. Caleb let the silence sit a moment. Then he said, "Easy. Friends or fear?" The clerk did not answer, but his hands shook just enough to tell the truth. Outside, Caleb did not head straight back to the ranch. He took Eliza to a shaded spot behind the livery, near old barrels and the smell of sweat and horses. He kept his voice low. "He's got a reach," and he said, "and he's using it." Eliza stared at the ground. "He always does." She whispered. Caleb nodded once. He could have asked for every detail. He did not. He asked the only thing that mattered for survival. "Is he coming himself?" he said. "Or sending boys?" Eliza hesitated, then said, "He'll come when he thinks he's already won." That line stayed with Caleb like a splinter. On the way out of town, they passed the deputy again. The man was leaning on a post, chewing slow, watching folks like a cat watches mice. He looked Caleb over, then let his eyes drift to Eliza. Caleb felt his stomach turn. The deputy did not say much, but he said enough. "Best return property," he called. Casual as a man talking about a stray calf. Eliza's shoulders rose toward her ears. Caleb stopped his horse. Not fast, not angry, just stopped. He looked at the deputy and spoke in a calm voice that carried. "People ain't property," he said. A few heads turned. The deputy smirked. "In my county," he said. "You'll find it works different." Caleb nodded like he had heard that kind of talk before. Then he tipped his hat. Not polite, not rude, just finished. He rode on, but he remembered the deputy's name stitched in faded thread. Tom Larkin. That was useful. Back at the ranch, the afternoon heat wrapped around the house like a heavy blanket. Eliza moved slower than the day before, and pain showed up in places she didn't expect. She tried to hide it, but Caleb noticed the way she paused before sitting, the way she held her breath when she had to stand. He left a tin of water on the table and a clean cloth beside it, then went out to fix a hinge that did not need fixing. He gave her dignity the way some men gave charity, quietly, without making a show of it. Near sundown, a rider appeared at the far fence line. One rider, sitting loose in the saddle like he belonged there. Caleb stepped onto the porch and did not reach for his rifle. Not yet. The rider stopped outside the gate and called out, "Evening, McRae," the man said. Voice friendly. Too friendly. Caleb did not answer right away. He watched the way the horse shifted, the way the rider's eyes kept flicking toward the house. Eliza stood inside the doorway, half hidden, half frozen. Caleb spoke in a normal voice. "Evening," he said. The rider smiled. "Word is you picked up a stray," he said. "A young woman that ought to be home." Caleb felt the old anger rise, the kind that made men do stupid things. He kept it down. He asked, "Who's asking?" The rider's smile held. "Wade Hart," he said, "and he's willing to be reasonable." Caleb let out a slow breath. Reasonable was what wolves called themselves right before they bit. He stepped down from the porch, staying between the rider and the door, and he said, "Calm as dry wood." Tell Wade Hart," Caleb said. "I don't hand people over to men who send boys to do their talking." The rider's eyes narrowed. He glanced at the door again, and that glance told Caleb something new. This was not just about dragging Eliza back. This was about proving nobody could stand in Wade Hart's way. The rider tipped his hat, still smiling, and turned his horse like he was leaving. But as he rode off, he called back one last thing, soft and cruel. "He's coming tomorrow," he said, "and he ain't coming alone." Caleb watched the dust trail fade into the evening light. Then he turned toward the house, and he saw Eliza's face, pale and tight, as if tomorrow was already clawing at her. Caleb walked inside, set his hat on the peg, and started checking the locks like a man who knew locks did not stop monsters, because now he had to make a choice that would shape everything after this. Would he run with her into the open desert, or would he stand his ground and let Wade Hart come to his door? Caleb did not sleep much that night, not because he was brave, but because he was old enough to know how trouble moved. It moved quiet. It moved early. It moved in groups when it smelled fear. He sat at the kitchen table with a lantern turned low, cleaning a rifle that was already clean, then putting it away like he hoped he would not need it. Every so often he glanced toward the back room. Eliza was in there, not really sleeping, just lying still the way wounded people do when they are afraid that moving will invite more pain. The house creaked once, and she inhaled sharp. Caleb kept his voice soft, like you would speak to a skittish horse. "You're safe," he said, and even he could hear how thin those words sounded against the dark. He stepped outside before dawn and walked the fence line again. The air was cooler, but the ground already held heat, waiting for the sun to return and turn everything into a stove. He checked the gate, the corral, the windows. He did not find fresh tracks, which somehow made it worse. If they were coming, they were not wasting steps. When the light finally came, Liza shuffled into the kitchen, blanket around her shoulders, hair messy, eyes tired. She tried to act like she did not hurt, but she moved like a person carrying glass inside her body. Caleb poured coffee into a tin cup and slid it across the table. She took it with both hands like she needed warmth more than caffeine. He did not ask questions right away. He waited until she took 2 sips and her breathing steadied. "Tell me one thing," he said. She looked up, guarded. "What? Does he care about how it looks?" Caleb asked. "Or does he just care about getting you back?" Eliza stared into the coffee like it held the answer. "He cares about both," she said. Then after a pause, she added, "He cares most about people thinking he is a good man." Caleb nodded. That was important. A man who wanted to look good could be trapped by his own mask. A man who did not care could not. Caleb stood and went to a small drawer by the window. He pulled out a scrap of paper and a stub of pencil, the kind ranchers used for feed tallies and fence measurements. He wrote a few lines, then folded it tight. He paused, then added one more line, 'cause names matter and debts matter out here. He wrote, Tell Marshal Rudd it's Caleb McRae, the man who pulled you out of that winter wash in '82. Then he folded the note tighter, like he was trying to keep the past from leaking out of it. Eliza watched him. Who's that for? A man who owes me, Caleb said. Simple. He did not explain more, because explanations often sounded like promises, and promises could get people killed. He saddled his horse and rode to the nearest place a message could move faster than a man on the trail, a stop on the way to town, a trading post, a spot where a rider heading toward Flagstaff might pass. He handed the note to a traveler with a tired face and honest eyes, along with a few coins. Get it to Marshal Rudd up near Flagstaff. Caleb said, Tell him it's Caleb McRae from the winter wash in '82. He'll know it's me. The traveler raised an eyebrow. That the old marshal up near Flagstaff? That's him, Caleb said. The traveler hesitated, then nodded. Because money talks and fear listens. Caleb rode back with his shoulders tight. He did not like relying on help. But a man who tried to fight the whole world alone usually ended up feeding the coyotes. By mid-morning, the heat returned, thick and heavy. Eliza stayed inside, and Caleb stayed near the porch. Then dust rose on the horizon. Not one rider, 3. They came in a line like they had practiced it. Easy in the saddle, hats low, rifles resting casual. The lead man was not a boy. He was older than the others, thick in the shoulders, riding like he owned the ground under the horse. Caleb knew before the man even reached the gate. That had to be Wade Hart. Wade stopped outside the fence, not crossing it, like he wanted everyone to see he was polite. He smiled and lifted his hand, friendly as a church usher. Morning, McRae, he called. Caleb did not move. He kept both hands visible, empty, which was its own kind of warning. Morning, he answered. Wade looked past him at the house. His eyes were light and calm, the kind that made folks trust him, right up until they realized trust was the tool he used to pry doors open. I'm here for my stepdaughter, Wade said, voice smooth, not loud. He said it like he was doing a good deed, like the whole town ought to thank him for showing up. You're harboring her, he continued, and I'm not looking for a mess. Caleb watched the other 2 riders. They were not looking at him. They were looking at windows. That told him what they expected to do. Caleb kept his voice even. She ain't going anywhere she don't want to, he said. Wade smiled wider, like Caleb had made a cute joke. She's confused, Wade said. Women get confused, he added. With that soft laugh that made it sound like kindness, Caleb did not laugh. He heard a small sound behind him, the floorboard inside. Eliza had come to the doorway. She stayed half hidden, but Wade saw her anyway. The mask on his face did not drop. It just tightened. Lizzie, he said. Gentle. The way he said it made Caleb want to spit. Come on home, Wade said. I'll forgive all this. Eliza's hands clenched around the doorframe. Caleb stepped slightly to block her view of Wade, not because he wanted to control her, because he wanted her to breathe. Wade's eyes shifted to Caleb. McRae, he said, still calm. This is family business, Caleb nodded once. You make it sound clean, Caleb said. Wade's smile faded just a touch. You don't know what you're meddling in, Wade replied. Caleb leaned forward a little, just enough to make it clear he was not backing up. I know what fear looks like, he said, and I know what it looks like when a man wants his fear back in his house. For the first time. Wade's voice cooled. You're making a mistake, he said. He glanced to the side, and one of the riders shifted his rifle. Not pointing it, just letting it be seen. Wade kept talking, still in that friendly tone, but now the words had teeth. I'm going to Cameron tomorrow, he said. Deputy Larkin will be there, he added, like he was mentioning weather. And I'm bringing folks who don't mind doing things the hard way. Caleb felt Eliza behind him stiffen. Wade tipped his hat again, polite as ever. Then he turned his horse, and the 3 riders left in a slow, easy walk, like they had all the time in the world. Caleb waited until the dust settled before he spoke to Eliza. He did not sugarcoat it. He's setting a stage, Caleb said. He wants witnesses, Eliza whispered. Caleb nodded. Yeah, he said. And he wants you scared enough to step back into his hand. Eliza's voice shook. What do we do? Caleb looked toward the road that led to Cameron, then farther toward Flagstaff. He had two choices, run and be hunted, or go where Wade wanted and flip the table on him. Caleb picked up his hat and settled it on his head, a slow, steady motion that meant a decision had been made. We go to Cameron, he said, and we go today, because Caleb had just realized the worst part. Wade was not coming to take Eliza quietly. He was coming to make sure everyone learned what happened to any man who tried to keep her safe. They left before the sun climbed too high, because Caleb knew heat wore people down faster than fear did. He packed light, water, a little food, clean cloth, and a small jar of salve. Eliza came out with the blanket still around her shoulders, moving stiff like her bones had learned to brace for pain before her mind even woke up. Caleb did not tell her to hurry. He just set a steady pace and let the miles do their work. The road toward Cameron ran dry and open, with the kind of emptiness that made a person feel watched, even when nobody was there. Eliza rode behind him for a while, then beside him, when she could. Quiet most of the time, she looked at the horizon like she expected Wade to step out of it any second. Caleb kept his eyes on the ground as much as the distance, reading tracks the way some men read newspapers. After a few miles, he saw it. Fresh hoof prints, 3 horses, not trying to hide. They were pacing them, staying just far enough back to look like they were minding their own business. Caleb felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his shoulders loose. Eliza noticed anyway. She always noticed. I feel them, she whispered. Caleb nodded once. I do too. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small piece of jerky, and held it back to her without turning. Eat, he said. It was almost funny, the way trouble followed them like a shadow, and he was still acting like an old ranch hand fussing about somebody skipping meals. Eliza took it, hands shaking, and chewed like she was forcing her body to remember how to live. By late morning, they could see the buildings near Cameron, low and dusty, with the bridge area and the river cut somewhere down below. Not much to look at, but plenty of eyes, and that was the point. Wade wanted eyes. Caleb guided his horse into the main stretch and felt every gaze land on them. Men at hitching posts paused. A woman carrying a bucket stopped mid-step. Someone at the trading post doorway leaned back into the shade to get a better look. Eliza pulled her blanket tighter. Caleb did not touch her. He just moved his horse half a step so his body blocked her from the worst of it. Deputy Tom Larkin was there, just like Wade promised. He was leaning against a post, hat pushed back. That lazy smile on his face like the day was a joke and everyone else was the punchline. 2 other men stood nearby, and Caleb recognized one of them as the rider who came to his gate. Deke. Deke looked pleased, like a man who thought the ending was already written. Larkin stepped off the post and walked toward them, slow and casual. McRae, he said, drawing the name out. You sure do like making work for good folks. Caleb swung down from the saddle, moving careful so Eliza would not feel abandoned. He kept his hands low and open. I came to keep things calm, Caleb said. Larkin chuckled. Calm as you handing the girl over, he replied. Eliza's breath hitched behind Caleb. He did not turn to look at her because he did not want to give Larkin the satisfaction of seeing her fear. Caleb spoke to the deputy like he was talking about cattle prices. You can ask her what she wants, he said. Larkin's smile stayed, but his eyes sharpened. He glanced past Caleb, straight at Eliza. Well now, he said. That sounds fair. Eliza stared at the deputy like he was a snake in church. Her mouth opened, then closed. Words did not come easy when fear had a hand around your throat. Caleb could feel her shaking through the air, so he gave her another kind of choice. He shifted 1 step to the side, just enough so she could be seen, but not enough for her to feel exposed. Then he said, low and steady, you don't owe anybody a speech. 1 word is enough. Eliza swallowed hard. Her voice came out small, but it came out, no. That 1 word hit the street like a rock in a still pond. A few heads turned. A couple folks looked down at their boots. Larkin's smile thinned. Well, he said, she's confused. Caleb nodded, like he had been expecting that line. Funny, he said. She sounded clear. Deke stepped forward, impatience on him now. He raised his hand toward Eliza, not quite touching, but close enough to make her flinch. That flinch was all Larkin needed. There, Larkin said, pointing. She's scared. She needs to go home. Caleb's voice dropped. She's scared of you and the men you stand with. Larkin's face tightened, then smoothed again. He loved having power too much to show anger. He stepped closer to Caleb, lowering his voice as if offering advice. McRae, he said, you're old enough to know how this works. You walk away, you keep your ranch, and nobody gets hurt. Caleb almost laughed, because that was the most honest thing the deputy had said all day. He looked around at the people watching. He saw a few sympathetic faces and a whole lot of fear. He realized Wade had already done the work, shaping the crowd into a wall. Caleb chose a different tactic. He turned toward the trading post doorway and raised his voice just enough to carry. If Ben Holloway was anywhere in Cameron, he'd be in that doorway, watching the road like he always did. I'm looking for a man named Ben Holloway, he said. A pause. Then an older man shifted in the shade, eyes wary, like he did not want to be named. Caleb kept his tone mild. I bought feed from you last summer, Caleb said. You remember me? Ben Holloway nodded once, slow. Caleb continued, still calm. You ever seen Wade Hart lose his temper? Caleb asked. When he ain't getting his way, the street went quiet. Larkin snapped, quick, that's enough. He reached for Caleb's arm. Caleb did not strike first, but he did not let his arm get grabbed either. He twisted away, and the movement brought him chest to chest with Deke. Deke shoved him hard. Caleb stumbled, caught himself, then came back with one short, hard punch to the ribs, the kind that took air out without breaking bones. Deke doubled over. The crowd gasped. Larkin's hand went to his gun. He pulled it halfway, not pointing it yet, just letting the metal speak. The street went so quiet, Caleb could hear his own breath. Eliza made a small broken sound behind him, the kind that happens when fear turns back into a body. Caleb held still. He did not go for a weapon. He lifted both hands again, breathing steady. Caleb spoke without turning. Stay with your horse, he said. Hold the reins. Don't run. Larkin stepped closer, voice low and nasty now. You just made this easy, he said. Caleb met his eyes and saw it, that little spark that said the deputy wanted an excuse. It felt like Wade had planned every inch of this, right down to the moment a gun would leave leather. And that was when a rider appeared at the far edge of town, coming in fast, dust rising behind him like a warning flag. Caleb did not know the man yet, but the rider was headed straight toward them, and he was not slowing down. And Caleb realized, in one cold second, that Wade Hart had timed this perfectly. Because Caleb suddenly realized that Ryder might be the only man left who still remembered what a debt looks like. The rider came in hard, dust rolling behind him like a storm that had learned a man's name. He pulled up near the hitching post, swung down, and the street felt different the second his boots hit the ground. You could see it in Deputy Larkin's eyes, that flicker that said, "This ain't my town for the next few minutes." The rider was older, lean, sun-worn, with a badge that did not look like it came from a local pocket. Marshal Rudd. Caleb did not smile. He just breathed out slow, like a man setting down a heavy bucket he had been carrying too far. Rudd took one look at Deke bent over, one look at Larkin with his hand near a gun, and one look at Eliza tight behind her horse. Then he did something simple that changed everything. He spoke to the crowd, not loud, just steady. "Who's the young woman?" he asked. "And who's speaking for her?" Eliza's throat tightened, but this time she did not go empty. She stepped half a pace forward, still holding the reins, still shaking, but standing. "My name's Eliza Hart," she said, voice thin but real, "and I speak for myself." That was the moment the whole thing turned. Not because the marshal arrived, not because Caleb could throw a punch, because she claimed her own voice in front of people who wanted her quiet. Rudd nodded, like he had heard that kind of courage before and respected it. He turned to Larkin. "You got a warrant?" he asked. Larkin tried to laugh it off, but his mouth did not quite manage. Rudd waited. Balance is a hard thing to fight. And Caleb kept his hands up on purpose, buying seconds the way an old cowhand buys time in a storm. "No," Larkin said. Finally, Rudd looked at Wade's man, Deke, then at the crowd. "Then the rest of you," he said, "are just standing around hoping fear does your work for you." He stepped closer to Eliza, not too close, giving her room. "Do you want to go with Wade Hart?" he asked. Eliza swallowed. Then she said the word that mattered. "No." Rudd tipped his head. "Do you want protection?" he asked. Eliza glanced at Caleb, then back at the marshal. "Yes," she said. That was all the law needed when the law was in the hands of a man who still believed in it. Rudd turned to Larkin. "She rides with me," he said. Larkin's face tightened. "You don't know Wade Hart," he muttered. Rudd's eyes stayed calm. "I know men who hide behind respectability," he said. "I've met plenty." Rudd did not hang anyone. He did not let a mob form. He did not turn it into a show. He did it the right way, the slow way, the way that lasts. He took statement. He told folks to stay put, and somehow they did, because his badge didn't ask twice. Then he looked at Caleb. "You did right bringing her into daylight," Rudd said. Caleb nodded once. It was not pride. It was relief mixed with the old bitter taste of knowing this was not over. Because Wade Hart would not take humiliation easy. That evening, with the sun sliding down and the heat finally loosening its grip, Rudd escorted Eliza out of Cameron. Caleb rode a little behind them, close enough to help, far enough to let Eliza breathe. On the trail, she did not talk much. She did not need to. But after a while, she glanced back at Caleb, and for the first time, her eyes held something besides fear. They held a question. Caleb answered it without making it fancy. "You don't owe me trust," he said. "You just keep going." Eliza nodded. And Caleb realized something that matters for every person listening to this right now. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not win a fight. That day in Cameron was not just about a rancher and a young woman. It was about a choice. The choice to let fear run the town or to put fear in its place. Here's what I learned watching that street in Cameron. Most of us ain't facing badges and rifles, but we all get cornered by something, a memory that won't quit. A person who knows exactly where you're soft, a habit that keeps calling your name when you're tired. Sometimes the bravest thing ain't a punch or a gun. Sometimes the bravest thing is to say one clear word when the whole world wants you to stay silent. And hope, real hope, is built out of small choices made under pressure. If this story is speaking to you, hit like. It helps more folks find these old Western stories with heart. And if you want the rest of this ride, subscribe so you do not miss what comes next, because Wade Hart is not finished yet, and Caleb just put his whole life on the line. Now tell me something in the comments. What time is it where you are right now, and where are you listening from? And later, when the dust finally settled, Caleb would learn that saving a life can also rebuild one. Because the next part is where Wade stops playing polite, and Caleb learns what a desperate man will burn down just to feel powerful again.